Okay, let's talk about business process tracking and some of the updates we've recently made. The service is still in public preview, but these updates do get us one step closer to GA. So looking forward to that. Now, one thing to notice is first off that business process tracking is now a top level Azure resource. So this does introduce a few new opportunities or capabilities. Number one is RBAC, so we can now control RBAC directly at the business process level because it is that top level resource. We also can do, what you would come to expect from top level Azure resources. So implementing locks, which is probably pretty interesting if you want to avoid any inadvertent changes to a deployed business process. That lock might be of interest to you. And then naturally tags is just a good practice when you're in Azure to be using tags to add metadata to your process. Now, once again, this hasn't changed. We've got reliable data delivery to a customer's ADX instance. This is really important in my mind because this means the customer owns the data. That also gives customers the opportunity to enrich this data as well and complement it with other enterprise data. And another, opportunity that comes with this, because it is your data, there's no blocking here going on. You can go ahead and connect Power BI or workbooks, Azure Monitor workbooks that is, and build custom reports if you so wish. So that is something that I think is pretty important. Now, in terms of more functional, functionality that we've introduced, probably the number one thing here is the business process stage status, and more specifically, being able to indicate whether or not a stage has been successful or if it has failed. And I think that was something that we didn't have previously. And I think it's pretty important for a customer to be able to control that. And we didn't want to prescribe what failure means, right? So we give you the opportunity to implement failure as you see fit. And that could be failure due to a technical issue, like in the underlying workflow, or that could be because a business process rule has been violated. Either way, you can control those things and model that in the business process itself. And you can see some of this on this screen. Well, we'll get into a live demo, but you can see here we've got case 1173, which happens to be this particular case on the right-hand side. And we see that we do have a stage that has a failure. And so as a result, we show this red icon for you. And so these would be things that you now could say, hey, I now have a business process where I have at least one stage that has failed. And if there's multiple stages, we'll represent that here. Otherwise, if you just have successful stages, then you get the green check mark and everything is good. So this was probably one of the top feedback items that we did receive. So really excited that we can go ahead and deliver on that. In addition, we did make some additional enhancements to the token picker. So number one, we did rename what used to be known as business ID to be transaction ID, just to be more consistent because we do call this transactions. So I think it makes sense for it to be referred to as transaction ID. Naturally, you get to provide a name for that transaction ID. So in this case, we're using ticket number, but really it's up to you what you choose there. Another thing that we do support now is variables. So variables in the sense that you can choose a variable as your point in time that would allow you to emit data. Previously, we didn't allow you to do that. Now we do. And another thing we do enable you to do is to emit Boolean values at runtime. Previously, you would have to use an expression to do like a casting and convert to string. Now that just happens automatically for you. And because we do have Azure, we have business process tracking as a top level Azure resource, we do want to be able to plug that into integration environment and application. So that is a capability that is still very important to our overall vision here. And so we do allow you to add a business process as a resource. And we also have a special menu for business processes that have been added to an application. So those are all capabilities that are there. Now, just in terms of a scenario, you might have seen this before when I've talked on this subject, but what I've done is I've expanded upon this. And what we've got here is some parallel processing that does exist once we complete our work order. We've introduced a safety management system into this particular use case. And the other thing that we've also introduced is this publish to a large language model. So I will share that demo. That's a separate demo. That's really interesting too, but I'll share that for a different video. But here's our business process, a little bit more complicated than what you may have seen in the past. And we'll go ahead and dive right into a demo now. All right, so as mentioned in the intro slides, I talked about business process tracking being a top-level Azure resource. And so what that means is you can come into the search bar and just type like business process tracking, and you will now see an experience where you can go ahead and create a new instance. I'm not going to do that here, but I'll just show you sort of the main tabs. So you've got the basics, so you're selecting your subscription, your region. We do have a subset of regions available as of today, so this is June 7th. Come next week, we'll have all of the regions available. Some of it's still rolling out, but any of these regions that you do see for now are available to deploy this to. Transaction ID, that is what we used to call the business ID. So this would be something like a ticket number or a case number, something that would uniquely identify the transaction. Data storage, this is going to be your Azure Data Explorer instance. And so you'd go ahead and choose your cluster, choose your database, and then you have the opportunity to create a table. Here you can go ahead and create your tags and the final review and create experience. So this is a pretty quick experience, just take you, 30 seconds, a minute, and you'll have a business process tracking instance enabled. All right, so here I have an existing business process. This has been deployed, and I don't have any pending changes. And we can go ahead and open this up. So we'll open this in the editor. And this is the current business process. Here we've got some sequential steps, and then we start to do some concurrency or parallelism. And then we go ahead and we converge down below. Now, how you go ahead and create a stage, I've already got these populated, but just hit on this plus sign, hit add a stage, and then just give this a name. I'll just call this stage 2, and I can provide a description, my stage. Now, here's where I want to define my properties. So I could just call this like property 1, and we'll call this a string. If I wanted to include failures, I can go ahead and include failures and add properties. I don't necessarily have to have properties if I don't want to. If I just want to signify that something has happened, I can just map the ticket number, and that is enough. I always have to populate success. That's why we've got a star here. So I'd go ahead and add this. And now if I wanted to do some mapping, I switch over this toggle. I find a specific logic app. So I'd go ahead and select my subscription, find a particular logic app, and then find a particular workflow. I'll just choose this sample. Now I want to now map the data sources. So I'll click on this link, and this is going to pull up a read-only version of the designer. And in this case, I need to select a point in time first. So select a workflow action. It's at this point that we would consider this stage complete, and we'll send the information off to ADX. So here I need that ticket number. That's important for correlation. I'm not going to deploy this, so it doesn't really matter, but I'll just choose this message. I'm going to assume that this message includes my ticket number, and then my property. Here will just be this body. Now I can use expressions if I want, much like they can do in Logic Apps, and that is also supported now in the ticket number. That was something that wasn't previously supported. So I'd go ahead and hit next, and I could hit save. And now one thing you should be doing is you sort of go ahead and save these things is you can hit the validate button, and the validate button will go ahead and just make sure that you haven't missed a step. Obviously you can't deploy if you have these validation errors, but you might want to be incrementally validating before your workflow gets too large. So that would just be a suggestion that I do have. Now here I did go ahead and set a sequential step. If I wanted to add a parallel, I could go ahead and do that, and that's going to then start to branch out. I can then connect these as well. I'd be able to, once I populate this, drag it over to here, and then basically it would converge. And so you can think of that for either parallelism, or if it was conditions, that's also an example. So that's how you would go ahead and add stages. I'm going to just delete this one. Now, one thing I did want to talk a little bit was we have success and we have failure. And there's naturally kind of two types of failure in my mind. You've got a technical failure and you've got a business failure. So let's look at the technical failure first. I've implemented that here in my ticket creation stage. So when I have a successful stage, I'm going to collect all of this information. When I have a failure, I'm just going to go ahead and collect this technical error. So let's go ahead, let's see what this looks like. I'm going to go ahead and click on select data sources. That'll load a read-only version of that workflow once again. And when we have a success, we're going to go ahead and use this send message as my point in time. So what I do have here is a try catch model using scopes. And so this sort of fits this use case quite well in my mind. This represents the end of my workflow in a happy path. If I hit here, I'm reasonably confident that everything's good and I can go ahead and send all of this data out. Now, in the event I've got a failure, here's where I would be able to go ahead and catch an exception, on this compose, and then I've got a technical error. What I can do here is I can say write an expression of say result, and then go ahead and say try, and then scope try, which represents the name here of this action. So result is a built-in expression, and that does allow me to go ahead and capture like the exception that could exist there as well. So that represents a technical exception where I'd want to go ahead and capture that information. Now let's talk more about a business exception. So here, what we're going to do is have a safety. There's a flag in our messaging that is going to say has a safety incident occurred. And if that flag is set to true, then I'm going to call this out as red because safety incidents are naturally not good when we're talking about power outages and sending out field technicians. So let's go ahead, let's click on the select data sources and take a closer look at what's going on here. What we've got is we're on the success tab. If I scroll down here, I'm going to find that if the condition of safety incident is not equal to true, so it's equal to false, that means we don't have a safety incident. So that's a good thing. And so basically we're going to send the ticket number and the safety assessment when we hit this particular action. Now, if we flip over to the failure, this is a situation where the safety incident condition is met, right? So we do have a safety incident. So we're going to go ahead and send a message to the safety incident system. And because this is mapped as failure, that means we're going to show red up on the dashboard. And so we'll show that in the demo here. And so, yeah, I think at this point we're in a good shape. We're going to go ahead and, run the transactions. And as we're running the transactions, we'll see the transactions, like the stages being processed, being updated in our transactions view here. And we'll actually see these particular stages light up, green meaning successfully complete, red meaning that we've got a failure, whether that's technical or business. That's really up to you as the implementer when you're going ahead and submitting that. And so yeah, we can head over to transactions here. And these are some previous transactions that I've run through. A couple things to note, we can filter out, right? So we can filter out based on cases that we want. We can also filter out based on specific timestamps as well. So let's go ahead and we'll just set this for 30 minutes and then let's run a few transactions through and see what happens. All right, so to sort of run this end to end, we're going to use the Microsoft Copilot, formerly Power Virtual Agents, to go ahead and basically take these requests in from a customer. So in this case, I'm at the company chatbot, and so I can just say hi. Let's zoom in a bit here. I can say I have a power outage. And so I can say yes. And so here I'm just going to go ahead and put in an email address here. And then we'll go ahead and create that power outage. We need to provide some details. So we can just say there has been a big rainstorm and power poles are down. Okay, we've got a case. In this case, it's case 1174. So that's something to be aware of. as we look at what's going on in the business process tracking. All right, so here I've split my screen, and I briefly paused. It was for like 5 seconds. So this is pretty snappy, pretty much in, I wouldn't call it real time, but I would call it near real time. Sorry, I hit refresh. So we've got 2 stages so far have been successful. Let's click into this and see exactly what that looks like. So here we've got a ticket created, and if we click into it, we'll see the details about the customer. And then we can also see we've got the work order created. So back to that original view, stage 1 was creating a ticket in the CRM. Stage 2 was creating a ticket in our work order management system. And the next stage that we need to perform is to dispatch that particular work order. So let's go ahead, let's do that now. So I've got a Power App that helps me go ahead and do this. And a case 1174 is in a created stage. So let's go in here, let's edit this. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to dispatch it, and we're going to dispatch this to someone fictitiously named Tom Smith. And so we'll go ahead and set that up. If we just give this a second or two, we should see that this number will adjust. This should increment to 3, and we should now have an order dispatched. If we refresh this here, we see that that's now at 3, and Tom Smith has received that. And I didn't hit the pause button there, so that you saw that as it was happening. So next up, we're going to be on site. Whenever a technician's on site, you definitely want to do a safety assessment, make sure that you've got safe working conditions. Because there's been a lot of water, unfortunately Tom has slipped due to the water and hurts their back. So we're going to call this out as a safety incident, unfortunately, for Tom, but we'll go ahead and we'll hit that, save that, and we should now be on site. Now, we're not going to flag that in the safety incident just yet. We were going to complete the work order. Good news is Tom was able to get some reinforcement and was able to go ahead and get some help, and we're going to go ahead and get this job complete. So let's now go ahead and complete, and there was some equipment that had to be replaced. So this was a relay, and we've got a material ID. So now we're going to call this job complete. So we'll go ahead and do that, and we will hit refresh, and this just give this a few seconds, and we should see this information being updated, right? So here we can see some of these have taken place already. Let me just make this full screen. So let's hit refresh, and we can now see that our entire business process is complete. So we've got 9 stages that are successful. We've got the data for them. We closed the ticket in the CRM, so that's a different workflow. We've sent out the customer communication indicating that their power has been restored and asked them to fill out a survey. We've updated inventory because we had to replace that relay. We've also published this to the LLM. Once again, I'm going to save that for another day. And then we've also got our safety check in place. And unfortunately, we did have an incident, and but we've now captured that. That will go to the safety management system for further triage, and there will be an investigation on what could be avoided in the future. So that's what this does look like. Let's just go ahead and expand this. In a situation where we didn't have a safety incident, everything here would be lit up as green, and so we would have everything's good. We didn't have an incident, so hence it being green. But that gives you a flavor of how you can manage an error. In this case, it's a business error. We didn't have a technical failure here, hence that being green in both cases. So yeah, that is a demo of some of the new capabilities. Really excited about the statuses, the stage statuses. That is pretty awesome, and it's something that was definitely being looked for. We're definitely interested in your feedback. Do reach out if you've tried this and you have feedback on anything that you feel is missing. And go ahead and try this out. This is a public preview as of you watching this video, and go ahead and give it a try. Thank you. Okay, and one last thing, I almost forgot, but one last thing I think is also quite important is that you can still link a business process to an integration environment and application, even though this is now a top-level Azure resource. So what I can do is go into an existing integration environment. I'm just going to choose this one because this is it's not part of this one at this point. I've got an existing application, and what I can now do is go into resources, click on add, and in this particular drop down, we're going to see a new resource type that wasn't there previously. And so this resource type is business process. And so I will now be able to go ahead and select this particular business process. It now gets added as a resource. And then what it also gets, what also happens is it does show up in this business process menu as well. So here is that particular business process. We can also click on it here. And this allows me, as a launch point, I can go ahead and use these particular icons, or I can basically deep link directly into the resource itself. So still fulfilling that vision of a unified experience, even though the resource itself is separate to the integration application that lives in the integration environment. So just wanted to mention that as well before we close out here.